Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/MaliciousCompliance, where people conform to the letter but not the spirit of a request. If you're new around here, please do hit subscribe down below so that you never miss out on another video. But for now, let's sit back, relax, and enjoy some malicious compliance. You're saying I could have a raise this instant if my insurance wasn't so costly. Another post reminded me of this exchange that took place at a small company I worked for years ago. I felt that it more than qualifies as a malicious compliance, even though the exchange for said compliance is almost instant. So I had been working at this company for a couple of years. We were doing very well financially, and all the employees suspected it. A few knew it for a fact. But it was mid-recession and our company kept using that as an excuse for not giving out raises. That was the ploy they had used on me at the end of my first year, where I hadn't made a fuss about it. No raise? Okay. I was already getting paid pretty well, better than 90% of the other employees, so I felt very fortunate and just let it go. When the second year came around, I was feeling quite a bit less fortunate. Sure, I was at the top of the food chain pay-wise, but I also worked more hours than any other employee among that 90%. My job also required me to travel up to 7 months out of the year, where I spent an average of 4 continuous weeks on the road before being able to come home, for one weekend, to see my family, only to be flown right back out for several more weeks. All the guys in my position had also been promised a bonus plan was being created for us. This was first promised around the time when I was first hired. It had been over 2 years now, but that bonus plan was still nowhere to be seen. Meanwhile, our company had easily designed a new tech bonus plan only very recently. Using that plan as a guide, I ran the numbers and discovered that had the people on my team also qualified under that plan, I would have earned more than $250,000 just in bonuses for this last year. Needless to say, I was really angry at these guys. Before we get going, I should explain that my company paid for every employee's health insurance, including co-pays and deductibles. If you were married with kids, the company paid for the employee's plan, and then the company would pay for each dependent they added to the plan. This was one of the top benefits that not only attracted employees to them, but also helped with retention. So the day finally came when my supervisor was ready to talk to me about why he couldn't give me a raise. Because so many of us worked on the road for most of the year, we had way more employees than we had office space, which was still pretty ample for such a small company. Even so, our supervisors, except for one, didn't have their own offices, since they were also almost always on the road the same as us. So usually, whenever a supervisor wanted to talk to us in private about personal stuff, they would drag us into this one small office that included a few company officers, who were almost never there, and the company's HR manager, who was always there. This was convenient for them, since any such discussions taking place in front of HR also served as a discussion that could be used later as a warning, in case it was something where we had messed up, and they decided to fire one of us down the road. It also protected the company, since the supervisor could turn to the HR officer, who was sitting there so she could clear up any misconceptions should there be a question about what was being discussed. My supervisor had come to fetch me at my teeny tiny little cubicle that had almost nothing in it other than a framed picture of my wife on the desk. Seriously. He asked me if I could join him in the HR office like usual. Since he had already been a busy beaver telling some of his other charges that even though we all worked really hard, we just don't have the funds for any raises among any of the 12 employees that make up our division. I assumed it was my turn for the speech. Hey, OP, can you join me in the HR office for a few minutes? Sure thing, boss. After the door closed behind us, and both of us gave a polite nod to our HR officer, who was busily working on something that had absolutely nothing to do with us, we sat down and my boss put on his serious face. Which was rather hard for him. He was a salesman through and through and had a permanent but very genuine smile etched on his face. He started, "OP, as you're in no doubt aware, we've been facing serious financial issues since the start of the recession. And we're all very lucky that our little company is still afloat in light of those issues. I really wish there was some way I could give you a raise, and believe me, if there was any way at all that I could, I would give it to you," he said. I sat for a moment, still debating in my head whether or not to say what I had been thinking of saying, or simply give in like everyone else had. I decided to go for it. We made a $28 million profit this year. A look of stunned surprise momentarily flashed on my boss's face, and I heard the HR officer quietly gasp as she instantly stopped typing. "What?" was the only response my boss blurted out as he tried but failed to maintain his serious face, defaulting instead to his genuine smile, which gave me the confidence I needed to continue. "I don't mean the company made 28 million. I mean just our division made 28 million. The company as a whole made over $50 million. How do you know what the company made, OP?" he asked, the smile still firmly etched on his face since he was no longer using any brainpower towards expressions. I could see all the wheels turning in his head. The HR officer wasn't even trying to pretend she was doing something else. She now had all of her attention firmly focused on my every word. Because the office gives me a lot of various jobs to do during the off-season, I said, which was true. As I mentioned, we were on the road from about March all the way through September. Our off-season was October through February. This conversation occurred near the end of October, as any change in someone's pay plan would usually go into effect on January the 1st. During our off-season, there was literally nothing for us to do. We were salesmen with no one to pitch to. Mostly what we did was come into the office for a couple of hours every day, put in an appearance, then slink off around 11 or 12 and go home. This was the season when we caught up with our family and recharged our batteries for the next season. It was one of the benefits that made the job so attractive, like a school teacher, or better yet, a baseball player. We got several months off before having to go back to do the job for which we were hired. However, if someone in the office needed help with something that we were capable of doing, obviously, we would help them. So most of our off-season work consisted of keeping in touch with accounts to see if everything was going okay. Basically reminding them we exist in case any work came up, so they would think to call us first. And doing whatever office work someone needed help with. Seriously, office workers would often come in and just grab one of us to come help with whatever project they were working on. We were a great extra brain or extra set of hands for them since we were an exceptional source for how the company operated as a whole, and how to most efficiently order a project so that it would maximize the benefit to not only those for us in the field, but the company as well. Plus, we just enjoyed doing it. It was fun for us because it was something different to do. Calling accounts was really boring. Playing Office with the girls was way more fun. Try not to read too much into that though. I will fully admit that there was no small amount of flirtation going on. We were all young, good-looking people, but flirtation was as far as it went. At least with me it was. Looking back on it though, it does strike me how very classically designed the company was. Everyone who worked in the field was a guy, while everyone in the office who wasn't a manager of some kind was young, female, and really hot. They even had one girl they hired who was a bona fide cheerleader for a major football team. And boy how they went out of their way to use her and her cheerleader status when meeting new customers. It was all very, very cliched, like a script right out of Mad Men. But anyway, I should get us back on track here. One of those little office jobs I got pulled aside for was helping one of the girls in accounting organize and complete the year's accounts. We had money coming in from different jobs all over the country, and the records and checks didn't always make it obvious which job they were for or what dates they covered. To organize it, she needed someone who knew when and where each of those jobs took place. The only two things she hadn't counted on were that number one, I would find those records extraordinarily interesting, and number two, I can add. I could see my boss quickly trying to think of what job I had helped with that gave me access to this information, but reverting back to the power play that he was, he just as quickly realized that wasn't what was important right now. Look, OP, I can appreciate that you have some numbers that you think are implying that we are making this huge profit, but you're not thinking about all the expenditures that our company also has to endure. Why? Your health insurance alone costs the company over $5,000 per year. I'm sorry, what? Was all I could think to reply, since it seemed odd for him to compare $5,000 to $50 million. But I wanted to give him the respect he deserved to see exactly where he was going with this. Sure, he said. Every employee out there and all of us in here, we cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars every year for things that all of us just take for granted. Now, a smile fell on my face because this was my boss at his very best. He was the ultimate salesman, and he was the main reason I had come to work for this company. I wanted to learn how to do what he did. The man taught me tons. I used to joke that he could talk the grease out of a biscuit without cracking the crust. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the HR officer's shoulders drop a little as she relaxed while listening to my boss pour it on. And it's expenditures like those that none of us ever see that we should think about, he finished. I see. It was the only thing I could think to say. I suppose that, deep down, I hadn't really thought that I was going to change his mind and get a raise. I had already been told by a few of the other guys, who had already gone in there with him, that he had given them the same speech as last year. But I was a salesman, goddarn it. I had the insider information I was going to use to crush him. I was going to go in there and succeed. But now that I could see the light for any hope of success being slowly snuffed out, it all just felt very depressing. There's a saying in sales, one of those little axioms among our kind, that is one of those hard and fast rules that a salesman should never forget. A rule straight out of the salesman Bible. Never sale after the close. The golden rule of a salesman. From the bazaar barker in Calcutta to the car dealer in Dallas. And it was my boss's Achilles heel. He was a very empathetic man who was trained to the highest heights in not only how to talk with people, but how to gauge them emotionally. Sales, after all, is nothing more than a conversation. He had become very attuned to people's emotions. He knew the exact moment when he had inspired you, as well as the very moment when your heart had fallen deep into the pit of despair. Although I had tried very hard to not let it show, he could see that I was really let down. OP, he started again. You worked really hard this year. I want you to know that. Above every other guy we've got working on our team. I appreciate your efforts the most. You always go above and beyond in every single duty that you perform. You don't just go the extra mile, you go every extra mile there is. And not only can I see it, but everyone in this company can see how hard you work every single day, and we all appreciate it. There is no one in this company who deserves a raise more than you. If it weren't for your insurance, I'd give you a $5,000 raise this very instant. But... Sound of records scratching as a brilliant light inside me burst back into existence. Excuse me? I quickly interrupted. I could sense the tension building in the HR officer behind my boss. I know she wanted to speak up at this point, but was being held back by years of ingrained company etiquette. No, I mean it, my boss repeated. If it weren't for your insurance, I'd gladly give you a $5,000 raise right now." "Oh man, thank you," I said energetically. "You don't know how much this means to me and my family. Thank you so very much, boss." A look of total confusion had replaced his permanently etched smile, as I stood up and then reached over to grab his hand. My boss had no idea what's going on or why I was so suddenly excited and shaking his hand. "What do you mean?" he softly blurted out. The HR officer behind him had her face in her hands. "Yeah, our company doesn't pay for my insurance. My wife works for Mega Company, and their insurance is phenomenal. Seriously, it's one of the best in the US. I've been on her plan ever since she and I got married. Man, oh man, $5,000. I can't wait to call my wife. She's gonna be so excited. I'm gonna call her right now." Before he could even utter a syllable, I turned around and literally rushed out of the office, almost at a run. Instead of going back to my cubicle, I rushed out back into the parking garage and headed straight to my car. I turned my phone off so everything would go straight to voicemail. Then I jumped in and took off. At first, I just drove around for a bit, since I had no actual destination in mind. This was a spur-of-the-moment decision after all. But after 30 minutes or so, I decided to go get a late lunch at one of my favorite restaurants. After I ate, I headed back to the office. I turned my phone back on after I pulled into a parking space. Not surprisingly, there were 3 voicemails on my phone from my boss. To this day, I have no idea what they said. I never listened to them and deleted them at the end of the day. I headed back inside. As soon as I got to my cubicle, one of my coworkers told me that our boss wanted to see me. I asked where he was, and he told me he was still in the office with HR lady. So, I meandered over, and after putting on my best smile, I knocked on the door and peeked in. There was no one else in there but the 2 of them. "Hey, boss, coworker said you wanted to see me?" "Yeah, OP, come on in." I did as requested and took the seat that was offered to me. "So," he started, "you rushed out of here so fast, I wasn't able to tell you. Did you happen to tell anyone else about your raise?" I had called no one since I had literally turned my phone off, but he didn't need to know that, so instead, I cheerfully said, "Yeah, I called my wife right away. Oh my god, she is so happy. She wanted me to tell you, thank you from her." "That's great." I noticed the permanent smile was back, but it was very slightly different somehow, as though he was attempting to hide that he was painfully trying to remember exactly what he had been told about how to proceed. "Did you mention it to anyone else?" "Absolutely not," I said while remaining perfectly affable. I know well the company policy regarding discussion of pay plans between employees. I shot the HR officer a nod and quick smile, and she quickly returned a very awkward, uncomfortable smile back. Good, my boss said. "I'm going to honor what I promised you. Effective from today, your pay will reflect a raise of $5,000. But," he paused for effect, "I need your solemn promise that neither you or your wife will discuss this raise with any other employee from this company. If I hear even one single employee mentioning that you got a raise, it will be grounds for your immediate termination. Do you understand?" "Perfectly," I replied. "You have my solemn promise." And that is how I got a $5,000 raise from a company that wasn't giving raises to anyone. $5,000 extra a year, is that like $400 extra a month? That's a lot of money extra, but you know, if I was the top person in my team and my business was making $28 million a year, I'd be like, you know, maybe bump it up to 10,000? Maybe. Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.